Revenge with Karen.
You're joking, right? Nathan Cross said, flipping the last page of Meera's neatly tabbed budget proposal like it insulted him personally. This stuff, DNS renewal, registrar fees, SSL monitoring, sounds like fluff to me. Not exactly core operations, is it? Meera didn't blink. Not because it didn't sting, because if she flinched now, she'd give him what he wanted, weakness. She'd learned long ago that men like Nathan didn't fire you when you cried. They fired you when you made them uncomfortable. So she sat there in the conference room, spine straight, hands still folded over her notepad, while the junior analysts glanced at each other like someone had just farted during communion. You could smell the tension, cheap coffee, warm plastic, and the slow rot of poor judgment. Nathan spun his chair halfway toward the others. Let's get real, folks. We're trimming the fat, yeah. He jabbed the proposal with a pen like it owed him money. This isn't mission critical. We're building the future here. We don't need to keep investing in legacy leftovers. That's what he called it, legacy leftovers, the DNS records, the registrar accounts. The auto-renewal for the domain the entire back-end stack depended on. But Meera said nothing. She wasn't new. She was what you'd call pre-foundational. The company was 6 people and a rented AWS sandbox. She was the one who stayed up all night manually stitching things together, while the CTO threw ideas at the wall. And the CEO ran around pitching to angel investors like a caffeinated golden retriever. Those early days had been duct tape and Red Bull, and she still bore the scars, literal and digital. Name had ended up as the default contact on half the vendor accounts because nobody else could be bothered. It's temporary, they'd said, just for now. And then just for now became 7 fiscal years and 2 office moves later. But to Nathan, who just arrived from a much shinier, much louder job where he led growth acceleration initiatives, Meera was invisible. Worse, she was part of the furniture. And he didn't want furniture. He wanted movement. Flash, line item he could delete and feel like he'd accomplished something. He turned back to her and smiled that brittle, sharp smile of men who like to win arguments they don't understand. So, Meera, I've got a directive from finance. You've been officially trimmed. There was laughter, not much, but enough. It came from people who weren't brave enough to look her in the eye. The worst part, she recognized that laugh, was the same one they gave to Rita in accounts before they reorganized her role into non-existence. The same laugh they gave Ron in security when they moved his desk to the basement and forgot to tell HR. She wanted to throw her pen at the glass wall. Instead, she clicked it once, made a small note in the margin of her printout, and nodded. Understood, she said. It wasn't a surrender. It was a timestamp, a mental receipt, because Meera Devlin didn't forget. Later, back at her desk, tucked in the far corner near the humming bulk of the server cabinet they never fully decommissioned, she pulled up her budget file. Line item, domain registrar renewal, status, denied. She added a footnote per director cross, not core. Then she opened another file. This one wasn't on company storage. It was her own inventory. A spreadsheet she'd been maintaining quietly for years. Not because anyone asked her to, but because if she didn't, no one else would. Asset inventory, owner of record. She sorted by contact email. Her personal Gmail popped up next to 17 items. 17. That included the company's primary domain name. It also included the registrar, the auto-renewal account, the DNS failover credentials, the SSL cert renewal reminders, the emergency alert system, a handful of other minor entries like email forwarding for certain subdomains that nobody realized they relied on until they broke. She stared at it for a long moment, then clicked Save As and made a version timestamped with today's date. The file name? Legacy Ownership Snapshot Q3. XLSX Meera didn't make threats. She made backups. She made logs. And when she was cut off something, she didn't cry. She quietly noted the blade's direction, the angle, who was holding the handle. Across the room, a Slack ping lit up her monitor. It was from HR. Hey Meera, just a heads up, we're looking to start the annual audit of asset ownership next quarter. Could you prep a short doc summarizing any info you're responsible for? Doesn't have to be detailed, just enough for continuity. Thanks. She stared at the smiley face. Then she pulled up a blank doc and typed the first line. Subject, Infrastructure Ownership Summary. Per HR request under that, she wrote just one bullet point. Certain critical assets not documented in current IT database due to early-stage practices. Renewal and access responsibilities denied per Q3 Ops review. She paused, considered, then added, see budget denial record, DNS/registrar access flagged as non-core by Ops. Then she hit save. No alarms, no melodrama, just mirrors, quiet ones, placed where no one wanted to look. She leaned back in her chair, pulled her cardigan tight against the overzealous AC, and glanced at the empty desk where the old IT director used to sit before he took a sabbatical that turned permanent. She'd outlasted 6 execs, 4 CEOs, 2 full rebrands, and now she'd outlast this too, or she wouldn't. Either way, she'd documented everything. 2 weeks after the trimmed incident, Meera sat in the underlit war room they called a server closet, one of those spaces that always smelled faintly of dust and burned plastic. A thunderstorm crawled along the edge of the skyline, flickering against the wired rack like some angry omen. Outside, the open office buzzed with startup energy. Standing desks, caffeinated product managers, that one guy who never wore shoes. She sipped the rest of her coffee, burnt, stale, somehow still better than the new director's entire decision-making process, and opened the internal dashboard she'd built years ago when she got tired of asking engineers to send her CSVs. It was bare bones but functional, just like her. Labeled tabs, clean rows, color-coded by urgency. She clicked into the sheet marked in for renewals and access. Scroll, scroll, stop. The registrar expiration dates were coming up like tombstones. One in 9 days, another in 14. One she'd forgotten had already lapsed but was floating in a grace period. And next to each one, under primary contact email, was the same entry, murravelyn@gmail.com. She exhaled slowly, like someone stretching a sprained limb. It wasn't shocking, it had always been this way. Early on, when the founding team ran ops like a high-stakes LAN party, nobody cared about process. She was the adult in the room. She used her own card, her own email, her own name, because someone had to make the damn payments on time. Just until we hire a real IT team, the old COO once told her. That was 6 years, 4 acquisitions, and 3 offshore contracts ago. Now, when she tried to explain that she was still holding the strings no one remembered tying, Nathan just waved her off. IT owns this now, he'd said, distracted, typing during their 1-1. Consolidate. No need for you to worry. But the contact emails haven't been updated, she reminded him gently. Some accounts don't even have multi-factor auth enabled unless I trigger it from my personal device. If we lose access, look, he interrupted, with that practiced tech bro tone that sounded like condescension run through a diffuser. I appreciate the historical context. But we're moving forward. Let's stay out of the weeds, okay? She nodded, the action item to follow up with IT, and walked straight back to her desk to make a new backup of her spreadsheet. She wasn't upset. Not anymore. She'd moved past anger into a kind of clinical detachment, like a nurse watching a drunk uncle try to explain a broken femur at Thanksgiving. You could only shout so many times before you just started writing things down. That's where she was now. Writing things down. Started a new tab, Asset Owners by Email Contact. One by one, she copied over records from every system that still pinged her phone when it crashed. Registrar, DNS routing, failover monitors, uptime alerts, wildcard SSL certs, billing alerts for sandbox environments, access logs for the internal wiki. Systems nobody mentioned in budget meetings, but everyone screamed about when they broke. She sorted by email. Her name bubbled right to the top, 19 unique entries. She stared at that number for a full minute. 19 systems, most of them core to keeping API traffic alive, customer dashboards functional, and security protocols compliant, were still tied to her. Not the company, not ops, not even IT her. The storm outside cracked sharp against the glass. Meera looked up briefly, then went back to her keyboard. She clicked the top row. Added a new column, org access requested, another org access granted. Row after row, no, denied, ignored, delayed, pending. She stopped short of rage. This wasn't rage. Rage was emotional. This was data. She toggled over to her personal Gmail account and opened an old thread labeled Urgent Info Transfers 2019. It was a now-defunct back and forth between her and the second CTO, the one who got fired after that infamous pentesting isn't real town hall. In one email, literally wrote, "Just keep it in your name, Meera. It's fine. Nobody cares about registrars unless the site's down." She left it open for a moment, then archived it. They were going to care soon. She didn't want them to. But that rope Nathan was pulling, calling it streamlining, calling her non-core, was wrapped around something he didn't see. Something she had been holding with both hands while the whole building leaned on it like a lazy tenant. And now he was tugging harder, smirking while he did it. Meera closed the spreadsheet, but not before highlighting her email in yellow. Not for drama, just visibility. Then she did one last thing. She opened her password vault, scrolled to the registrar's portal, hovered over the account tied to her Gmail, and she disabled the auto-renew toggle, not to break anything, not out of spite. Just to confirm one very specific truth: if no one else noticed, nothing would happen. If something did happen, well, then maybe, someone would finally read the footnotes. She leaned back in her chair as the servers hummed behind her and the lights buzzed overhead like tired bees. And then she smiled, very faintly, and clicked save. It started with a whisper, two engineers talking just a little too softly near the coffee machine, cutting off the moment they noticed her walking by. Meera didn't confront them. She didn't need to. 30 years in tech had taught her how to smell bad news before it spoke. She simply waited until one of them, Lyle the back-end lead, poked his head into her cube an hour later and closed the sliding door behind him with the delicacy of someone stepping onto thin ice. "You didn't hear this from me," he said before she even looked up. His voice was low, almost guilty. "I never do," Meera replied, setting down her mug. "They're planning a reorg. Q4. Quiet cuts. Not the only one, but Nathan's been asking which roles can be absorbed by junior staff." Her heart didn't jump. It didn't flutter or seize. It just settled, like a box finally closing. Lyle continued, awkwardly rubbing the back of his neck. "I told him nobody else here even knows what registrar escalation means, let alone how to manage failover mapping. He said that was why we need to modernize." Meera didn't blink. "Thanks, Lyle." He hovered. "Good, I'm fine," she said. Just thinking, and she was, but not about saving herself. She stayed late that evening, not out of panic, but purpose. It was different now. The game had shifted. No more trying to prove her relevance to a man who thought GitHub stars were the measure of technical value. No more trying to nudge, remind, escalate. She'd seen what happened when legacy knowledge walked out undocumented. It was always a bloodbath. And Meera, all her restraint, hated watching people bleed because someone else played dumb. She logged into the registrar's portal, the one still under her name. The one Nathan insisted wasn't core. Her Gmail was still the recovery email. Her backup phone still received two-factor prompts. Her credit card, which she'd never been reimbursed for properly, was still the payment method. She went through the account line by line, cleared her email, cleared her name, removed the card. Every access point was unhooked. The account now sat like an unmoored ship, still technically there, but adrift. The domain was set to expire in 22 days. She didn't click the renew button. Then she opened a folder labeled Transition Planning. It was one she'd started 3 years ago during another leadership shuffle, thinking maybe, just maybe, someone up top would care about knowledge continuity. No one had, but the folder was immaculate. Diagrams, ENS tree maps, handwritten notes from vendor calls, internal contacts, all the invisible duct tape that held their fragile infrastructure together. She zipped it, encrypted it, named it in for triage if I disappear zip, then she emailed it to herself. Personal account, offline backup, there, not sabotage, not blackmail, just insurance for them more than her. After that, she made a call. "Holy shit, Meera Devlin. Thought you'd finally gone feral and started living off-grid." "Hi, Will," she said, smiling into the receiver. "Still running black box infra?" "Yep, 2 years now. You wouldn't believe how many clients we have who let their entire stack ride on some intern's Google sheet. Please tell me you're not calling to pitch me a contract." "I might be," Meera said. "Not for now, just looking ahead." Will's tone shifted. "They don't deserve you, do they?" "They never did," she said simply. "I'll send you a calendar link," he replied. "Let's talk scope." When the call ended, Meera didn't feel victorious. She felt clean. She pulled up her calendar, her personal one, the only one she trusted anymore, and scrolled to a recurring event she'd kept on rotation for nearly a decade. Domain renewals 3 weeks out. She stared at it for a moment. The simple reminder had once been her digital North Star. The thing that made sure the lights stayed on, thing no one ever thanked her for remembering. She hovered, clicked delete. A little dialog box popped up. "Delete this occurrence or the entire series?" She clicked, "Entire series," then closed her laptop, and for the first time in years, walked out of the building without checking her phone. The first crack came in the form of 404 screen. It was a Wednesday afternoon. Sales had booked a high-stakes demo with a multi-region logistics firm, big contract, multiple zeros, enough for finance to start nervously whispering about bonuses. Meera wasn't part of the meeting. She just happened to be in the same building when it happened, hunched over her screen, documenting more legacy processes before they were orphaned like abandoned pets. Then came the Slack pings. Anyone seeing timeout errors? Internal API dashboard just went blank. Client is on the call, WTF. Meera, you know if the staging env is hooked to prod? She didn't reply, she watched. In the conference room, a sales exec scrambled to keep the potential client distracted while the live demo page hung in silence. Lyle was already in motion, fingers flying across his keyboard, headset on, jaw locked tight. The 404 wasn't just embarrassing, it was surgical. The internal service that failed was part of the identity layer, one that bridged customer logins between their shiny new front end and the graying architecture Meera had warned them never to mess with unless they understood the plumbing. Which, of course, Nathan did not. He arrived 5 minutes after the incident, smooth-faced, smelling faintly of cologne and hubris, already blaming engineering before the door had even shut. Why wasn't this flagged in pre-deploy QA? He barked. This is basic stuff, people. Lyle looked up, bloodshot and furious. There wasn't a deploy. The issue's DNS side. Something's not resolving cleanly upstream, maybe registrar-based. Nathan waved that off like it was someone else's child screaming in a Target aisle. DNS isn't my concern. Make it work. He turned to Meera, finally acknowledging her existence, and asked, is this one of the systems you still maintain? She could tell he didn't even mean it as an accusation. It was rhetorical, performative question tossed like a tennis ball over a hedge of his own ignorance. Meera met his gaze without blinking. Per your Q3 directive, DNS routing isn't under my scope anymore. He stared at her like she'd just told him the moon was hollow. She turned her eyes back to her screen. The demo failed. The client went cold. Sales started damage control. Nathan declared it a learning opportunity and suggested they rethink their dependency structure. Nobody asked Meera to help fix anything. Not officially. Later that day, legal chimed in on the growing internal thread. Should we be pulled in for discovery here? Any contractual exposure from the failure? To which Nathan replied, this was a minor service hiccup, not a compliance issue. Stay out of technical things for now. And just like that, legal folded. The risk became invisible because the director said so. Meera didn't bother replying, wasn't here to convince anymore. She was here to observe, record, clean. She returned to her personal laptop that evening, home now, feet up, rain slashing against the kitchen window, and opened a new browser tab in incognito. She created a fresh Gmail address, mdnforquestions@gmail.com. Then she wrote a short, careful email to an old tech lawyer friend who owed her a favor. Subject, quick question. Domain ownership and registrar transfers. Hey, pathetically, if a domain expired and I used to be the listed registrant, and that registrar didn't auto-renew because of a budget freeze, would I legally be able to re-register it, even if I'm no longer with the company? Asking academically. No rush. Hope the kids are good. She didn't hit send right away. Instead, she let the draft sit there, cursor blinking. It wasn't a threat. She had no interest in taking anything that wasn't hers. But something inside her, something very still and quiet, wanted to know how far the negligence reached. Not so she could exploit it, so she could confirm the shape of what they'd broken. Because they had broken it. It just hadn't finished falling yet. She finally hit send. Then she closed the laptop, poured a half glass of wine, and leaned back in her chair. In the quiet of her kitchen, lit only by the fridge light and a flickering storm outside, Meera allowed herself a smile. Not joy, not vengeance, just the kind of grim satisfaction that comes from watching someone dig a hole, trip into it, and then blame the dirt. She didn't light the match, but she could smell the smoke. It started with a calendar invite labeled Pre-Diligence Readiness Ops Infra. Meera stared at it for a second before clicking accept. No subject line, no agenda. Just a block of time next Tuesday and a guest list full of people who'd either ignored her, dismissed her, or quietly watched as Nathan Cross methodically erased her authority column by column. Still, she showed up. When the call began, Nathan led with his usual confidence, mispronouncing the name of the potential acquirer and calling the upcoming audit a pro forma thing, mostly a vibe check. He said it with the swagger of someone who thought due diligence was a paperwork nuisance and not a full-body scan of every screw holding the company together. They were wrong, and she knew it. Also knew what was coming the moment someone from the legal team, a woman named Teresa with a clipped accent and tired eyes, shared her screen. It was a spreadsheet titled, Critical Systems, Ownership and Access Logs. Halfway down the list, Meera's name started showing up. Once, then again, then again. By row 12, it was every other line. Nathan interrupted. We're in the process of migrating that stuff. The legacy naming conventions are just leftovers from earlier days. Nothing material. Meera said nothing. Teresa raised an eyebrow. Is that process documented? Of course, Nathan lied. We'll have a full handover package by end of week. Meera watched Teresa's face. She didn't believe him, but she didn't push. Not yet. The next day, HR sent her a request. Hi, Meera. As part of our ongoing systems audit, we'd love a short handover memo summarizing any technical areas you've historically managed. Doesn't need to be too detailed, just enough to give us coverage. There was that smiley face again, the one they used when trying to make exploitation look like a wellness check. Meera stared at the request for a long moment, then opened a new Word document. She didn't write a memo, she wrote a manual. Title, Core Infrastructure Dependencies Historical Overview and Current Status. She included diagrams, timestamps, login rotation records, vendor communications, phone call transcripts, Slack message IDs, DNS routing trees, certificate expiry patterns, notes on failover tests from 2018, even a table mapping Nathan's budget denial trail to the corresponding system exposure. She wrote carefully, clearly, without bitterness. Just clean, mechanical truth. The kind of truth you couldn't argue with. The kind that left fingerprints whether you touched it or not. It took her 3 nights and a Saturday. By the time she finished, it was 72 pages long. She uploaded it to the secure HR folder with no subject line, no commentary. Just the file, Devlin handover, final PDF. The last line on the last page read, Domain registrar credentials not available due to denied budget request, Q3 ops. No exclamation point, no flourish, just a single period, cool as the metal at the bottom of a locked filing cabinet. She didn't wait for the response. Instead, she closed the file, turned off her monitor, and stood in the silence of her living room with the sense that something heavy had finally been put down. There was no anger. That had passed months ago. What she felt now was precision, completion. Let them read, let them ask, let them panic. Her work was done. Saturday morning came in loud, but not the kind of loud anyone wanted. The company had scheduled a weekend onboarding for 3 enterprise clients, high value, high maintenance, high expectation types who wanted white glove treatment before cutting multi-year checks. Marketing had spun it as a frictionless integration window. Sales had promised complete back-end stability. Nathan Cross had called it a stress test we're absolutely ready for. They weren't. At 9:14 a.m., the first ping hit. Customer cannot authenticate. By 9:21, the logs showed 502s across the board, API gateway failing to resolve. 9:34, internal dashboards stopped loading. Product managers who'd never learned to read system metrics started hovering near engineers' desks like anxious pigeons. By 9:42, the war room was live. The ops team flooded Slack. Lyle's name appeared every 30 seconds. Is DNS resolving for anyone? Someone check upstream routing from the registrar. We're seeing TTL dead zones across clusters. Ethan barged in by 10 o'clock. Coffee in one hand, ego in the other. Why the hell isn't anything working? He snapped, eyes darting from screen to screen. Nobody answered. Not at first, because no one knew. The failures were cascading: login services, customer-facing APIs, internal admin tools, billing validation endpoints. Nothing was resolving. Engineers tried fallback IPs, staging routes, cached zones. Nothing held. It was like watching the building's plumbing burst at every joint while management insisted the toilets were fine. Nathan tried barking orders. Roll back the deploy. There hadn't been one. Spin up failover, couldn't reach it. Escalate to registrar. No one had access. And Meera was at a small brunch spot 20 miles away, sun on her shoulders, fork halfway to her mouth, listening to her friend complain about dating app bots. Her phone was in her bag. On silent. Turned off? The company had stopped including her in on-call rotations 3 weeks ago. Policy, they'd said. Meanwhile, back in the chaos bunker, someone finally said it out loud. This looks like DNS expiration. Silence. not confusion recognition. Then, scrambling. Login attempts to the registrar dashboard. Two-factor prompts that went to nowhere. A domain whois check that turned up a single name in bold under registrant, Meera Devlin. The timestamp showed expiration 14 hours ago. The grace period window was now ticking loudly. Lyle turned pale. Nathan didn't. He turned red. What the hell is she still doing on that account? He demanded. No one answered, because they already knew. The systems weren't failing. They were vanishing, one resolution lookup at a time, because no one listened. Because a single budget line, labeled non-core, been crossed out in red pen and smug confidence by a man who didn't know what infrastructure meant beyond the buzzword. By 11:22 a.m., customer support tickets were pouring in. Some clients were threatening to walk. Others were more surgical, asking if they should postpone contract signatures pending stability review. The engineering channel became a blur. Sweat. Desperation. Someone finally posted, "Can anyone get in touch with Meera?" Lyle replied. Quietly, she's off-grid. They dropped her from pager duty. Tension turned to something sharper. Not panic, guilt, because somewhere, deep down, everyone knew this wasn't sabotage. This was exactly what she'd said would happen. The registrar didn't auto-renew. The credentials were gone. The only person who could fix it, ignored, discarded, trimmed, and now everything was failing. And nobody could even say why, because they deleted the one person who carried the map. It was 12:47 p.m. when Lyle finally cracked. He hadn't left his chair in hours. A half-eaten protein bar sat melting near his elbow. 3 different Slack channels were melting down, product was hovering like gnats, and someone from customer success had just asked if they should start issuing refunds. He didn't answer. He couldn't. His fingers were flying across tabs, terminal windows, DNS dig traces, archive logs, expired cert timestamps, every tool in the playbook, bleeding data and going nowhere. The failure wasn't software. It wasn't code. It was foundational. Name resolution itself had collapsed, so he pivoted. He went lower, into the registrar logs, the ones nobody touched unless something was on fire. He ran a whois query on the company's primary domain, the one every single service hung on like meat from a rusted hook. The response came back instantly. Registrant, Meera Devlin status, expired pending deletion renewal, failed payment declined, no active card on file. Lyle froze. He knew what it meant, not just the technical implication, the political one, because Meera hadn't left in anger. She'd left in silence. She'd submitted her documents, walked away clean. Nobody had thought to ask what she still controlled, because they all assumed she'd just fade out like a deprecated feature. But she was the root zone. Now she was gone. He turned toward the war room. Nathan was pacing like a caged animal, barking into his phone. "No, I don't give a damn about the grace period. Just buy it back. Offer them something. Do anything. Why are we even having this conversation?" Lyle walked over. He didn't say a word. He just held out his laptop and rotated the screen so Nathan could see it. It took the director all of 5 seconds to read it. His reaction wasn't immediate. It was delayed, like his brain had to buffer the shame. First, his mouth opened. Then slowly, his hand went up and took off his glasses. Then he whispered, "Oh no." The room went dead quiet. It wasn't the quiet of confusion. It was the quiet of confirmation. People stopped typing. 1 p.m. muttered, "Jesus Christ." Another leaned back like she'd just been hit in the chest, because it wasn't a hack. It wasn't foreign interference. It wasn't some fluke of the cloud. It was them. They'd done this. Nathan's voice, when it finally returned, was hollow. Why the hell? Why the hell is she still on the account? No one answered, because it was all right there. In the budget logs, the access memos. The Q3 directive stamped with trimmed in capital letters and Nathan's own initials beside the denial. Meera had told them what would happen. She had flagged it, documented it, even created backup processes. They'd ignored her, not maliciously. Worse, casually, the kind of casual that ruins companies. Nathan's jaw clenched, eyes wild. "Someone get her on the phone, now." Lyle didn't move. He just stared at the screen and said quietly, "She's not answering." And for the first time since the failure began, Nathan Cross had nothing to say. Only the sound of fans whirring, keyboards stilled, and the weight of a truth too heavy to ignore. The lights hadn't gone out. They turned her off. Sunday morning, legal was fully engaged. The message came in at 7:12 a.m., marked urgent, requesting all documentation pertaining to registrar transfers, domain renewal history, and Meera Devlin's asset ownership as referenced in the Q3 Ops report. The head of legal, a tight-lipped woman named Rowan, who never raised her voice, arrived in jeans and a ponytail with a look that said she'd seen this kind of mess before, once, a startup that no longer existed. "What exactly are we dealing with?" she asked, eyes fixed on the director. Nathan, now visibly shaken, gestured to the projector, where the Who Is data still glared in silence. Meera's name, expiration timestamp, pending deletion status. Rowan read it once, then again. "So," she said slowly, "our company's entire infrastructure is built on a domain we technically don't own." Nathan blurted, "We did own it. She never." "I didn't." Anyone? Rowan cut him off with a lawyer's favorite weapon. Indifference. Was there a formal transfer request made to her? Silence. Was there a written agreement acknowledging the registrar account was being transitioned? More silence. Was the renewal budget approved after she flagged the risk? Now the silence had teeth. Rowan exhaled. Then we're exposed. Nathan's eyes darted around. "Can we just buy it back, reclaim it? I mean, we're within the grace period, right?" "Not without her," Rowan said flatly. "If her personal email is the registered contact, and there's no active payment method, the registrar will need her to re-authenticate before any renewal is allowed. And given the timeline, we may already be in the auction window. But she works for us," Nathan insisted, a note of desperation creeping in. Rowan's head tilted. "Does she?" He didn't respond, because Meera hadn't worked there for weeks. Not really. He'd been walking backward out of the building since Q3, cleaning up quietly, erasing herself with surgical precision. All that was left was a name in bold type, and a company unraveling beneath it. They tried calling her. Twice. No answer. No voicemail. They texted. Nothing. An email was sent with the subject. "Critical account action, immediate response needed." It went unread. Because Meera Devlin, at that very moment, was updating her consulting website from the quiet of her kitchen. A fresh header now read, "Meera Devlin, infrastructure cleanup specialist" underneath it, helping startups fix what they forgot to document before the lights go out. She sipped her coffee, watched the rain, and dragged a few portfolio pieces into her new case studies folder. And she titled "Legacy Overconfidence in Post-Funding Environments" another. The dangers of invisible infrastructure. She didn't gloat. She just wrote. Back at the company, Rowan informed the board. An emergency session was called for Monday. NDA bound, no minutes to be recorded. Nathan would present. The topic, registrar failure risk exposure and mitigation. By 6:00 p.m., the CTO, CFO, head of security had all been pulled into individual prep calls. Whispered emails zipped through inboxes. The chairman of the board requested a complete paper trail of Meera's denied budget requests. And deep in the war room, Nathan Cross sat hunched over a stack of binders, staring at a single email she'd sent him weeks ago. One line haunted him. "Please confirm which department will own registrar access going forward. I've been instructed this is no longer in my scope." He never responded, never even marked it as read. Now the company's domain sat in limbo, its entire identity, technical and legal, flickering on the edge of expiry. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even personal. It was paperwork. Cold, lawful, impeccably documented consequences. And Meera, she wasn't hiding. She was just busy. The boardroom was soundproof, but the silence still rang like a bell. Nathan Cross stood at the head of the long walnut table, fingers clenched around the clicker, sweat beading under his collar. Behind him, the 80-inch monitor displayed a slide he hadn't made himself. Rowan from legal had insisted on pulling the data directly. There was no branding, no polish. Just cold, unforgiving text. Who is record company domain registrant name. Meera Devlin expiration date. Saturday, 3:14 a.m. Renewal status. Failed auto-renewal. Disabled card removed. It looked like an obituary. To his left, the CTO leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, lips drawn tight. Across the table, the head of product was staring into her lap, as if hoping this would all end if she didn't make eye contact with reality. Nathan cleared his throat. We experienced a temporary DNS lapse during onboarding. Root cause traced back to registrar access tied to legacy credentials. The prior owner of record, Meera Devlin, was not available during the renewal window, and due to a lack of formal transfer, auto-renew failed. He paused, waited for someone to nod. No one did, so he kept talking. We've since engaged the registrar directly and are pursuing urgent remediation. There's no indication of sabotage or intent to harm. This was simply an oversight in process continuity. A beat. Then, from the end of the table, a voice, soft, clipped. You cut her funding? It came from the oldest board member, Genevieve Marchand, who'd been through 5 acquisitions and 2 near bankruptcies. She didn't yell, she didn't blink. Nathan stammered, yes. The budget line was denied due to a mischaracterization of registrar services as non-core. Another board member whispered, who called it non-core. Nathan didn't answer. He didn't need to. Rowan clicked to the next slide. Meera's Q3 proposal, clear as glass with the red markup circling the registrar renewal budget. Beside it, Nathan's own comment, non-core, trim, silence again. Only this time it wasn't neutral. It was clinical, no yelling, no swearing. Just the soft sound of reputations being quietly amputated. Nathan looked down. She never said, she didn't fight me on it. Rowan replied, she did in writing. Multiple times. Meanwhile, 50 miles away, Meera was on a Zoom call with a Fortune 100 client, calm, polished, screen-shared diagrams glowing behind her in perfect resolution. And that's why I always recommend never offloading registrar duties without chain of custody. Even small gaps can cascade into full-service outages. The domain is the spine. Everything else is cartilage. The client nodded, scribbling notes. I'd like to bring you in for a full audit. 3-month retainer to start, if you're available. I am, she said, and thank you. I'll send a draft scope doc after this call. She clicked leave meeting. The screen faded to her desktop. She leaned back, exhaled once through her nose, and picked up the tea cooling beside her laptop. Her phone buzzed. LinkedIn, you were mentioned in a post. From Lyle. Funny thing about legacy knowledge, it holds everything up, till someone decides it's non-core. Props to Meera Devlin for doing the invisible work that saved our hides for years. We didn't deserve her. She didn't cry, didn't cheer. She just smiled. Not a smug smile, not even a proud one. It was the kind of smile you make when the blueprint worked. When the trapdoor opened not beneath you, but beneath the people who assumed gravity wouldn't apply to them. Meera didn't burn the house down. She just walked out with the keys, and the house forgot how to stand. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.